And now turning to the economy, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen today tried to assure Americans that a recession is not coming. To dive into this topic, we spoke with Jonathan Williams, the chief economist and the executive vice president of policy at the American Legislative Exchange Council. Jonathan Williams, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
So first, on the U.S. economy, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said that last week's report on consumer prices was quite encouraging, adding that even though the U.S. growth has slowed, she does not expect a recession. Is our economy getting better?
Well, let's all hope that Secretary Yellen is correct on that front. I mean, it's been a long time coming. We've been through some painful quarters, obviously, with record high inflation. I mean, is the economy out of the woods yet? I don't think so. There's a few major problems on the horizon. One is the coming massive tax increase that our economy will see if nothing is done in Washington. And why is that? That's because the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, signed into law by President Donald Trump a number of years ago, is already beginning to phase out some of its business provisions right now. And if acute viewers of yours remember, all of the individual side protections from that Tax Cuts and Jobs Act go away and are repealed if nothing is done in Washington by the end of 2025. So in a couple of short years, I know it seems like a long ways off right now, we're going to be facing one of the largest tax increases in American history if nothing is done in Washington. That is a major threat that's looming, I think, over this discussion. Another one is, of course, our $32 trillion plus now of national debt and what that means for future tax increases, what it means for borrowing costs for America, what it means to many aspects across the economy. And so those are a couple of things. In addition, commercial real estate, I don't think is out of the woods yet, as we've seen many potential contracts coming up here in the next number of months over the course of the next couple of years. And so while I certainly hope, I think all of us can agree that we hope that Janet Yellen is correct in this regard, I think there's just too much uncertainty and too much risk when it comes to the policy environment to declare that we're going to be in for a soft landing or avoid a recession.
And of course, we know that Secretary Yellen just came back from China. And we know that according to the latest numbers released today, the Chinese economy grew just 0.8% in the second quarter. And Secretary Yellen says that could have some negative spillovers for the U.S. economy. What do you think?
Well, there's no doubt when you look at an economy the size of China's, and whether you believe the official government statistics coming out of China or not, I think it's a big open question for many economic observers. And if you take them at their word that this is, slowing, I do think that portends very dangerous things potentially for the world economy, as it's such a large market participant as we see in the Chinese economy. If they're going through this type of an economic downturn, I know there's talks about potentially the government in Beijing to really have a fiscal stimulus package potentially proposed here in the next number of weeks. And if it's in that sort of a dire condition, I do think there are some potential negative spillover effects for not only the United States, but the rest of the industrialized world.
So speaking of Washington spending and, of course, another type of debt, the Biden administration last week announced a plan to cancel $39 billion worth of student debt for some 800,000 borrowers. What's your take on that, and will it have an impact on the U.S. economy by any chance?
It's a huge policy question. I think one that many Americans view with a degree of huge amount of unfairness as part of the system. If you've worked hard and you try to get yourself through college without accumulating debt, or you've worked for years, if not decades, to try to pay off your student debt, you ask yourself the fundamental question, what about me now that this new group of folks with the debt is getting these debts potentially forgiven if this is held up by the courts? But I think it does raise the larger question of what's the proper way to decide the policy question on this of forgiving debt or giving some sort of relief. Not only just is it unfair, but it needs to go through the legislative process. People that are held accountable by the American people, by their voters, need to go out there and talk about this as a legitimate policy discussion in Washington, not some executive order or some approach just by the executive branch trying to take far more control, certainly than our founders of our American Constitution designed.
Jonathan Williams, thanks so much.
Well, thanks so much for having me.